So I will go and look back into a little bit about me, so you can know a little bit about me, because I think it's relevant to this topic. I have always been a technology enthusiast, but I was never an engineer. Okay, I've never learned a line of code before the pandemic, right? So this is a little bit about me. I studied business development, but I always loved technology. So I have always made teams, partnered with programmers, coders, and we have done very cool stuff. For example, this was a software we did back in 2009 to send like SMS messages when they were like a hit, right? So I have been in this technology development, right? This is me, for example. We have my kiosk, we have a little bit of software, but I have never ventured into doing the software, right? But then something happened, right? The pandemic happened, and I had very good reasons to start coding, right? So I'm new on this, and I'm very eager to learn from all of you and to share my point of view as a business consultant who has learned to code. Okay, so let's go to the topic now with no further ado, and let's go to my presentation. So in one of my business cases, I had this scenario that I had to solve for a company that I think was very interesting, and I hope that you can see how or manage to get different elements that Zoho provides so that we can make our clients more efficient, more cost effective, and also not forget about us, that how we can get into their vision, into their enterprise, and we can grow with them. Okay, so going a little bit over the index. Well, we got a little bit intro. We're gonna talk about the goals of this presentation. We're gonna go through the business case scenario, which I think is the most important thing of this, and then obviously the demo. We're gonna briefly go over the documentation that we're gonna need to make something like this. Okay. Then we're gonna go over the functions that we're gonna do, and then we're gonna go for a demo. And for last, from no coder to coder, maybe we can chat on this, have a conversation. Just my quick tips that what helped me get to where I am, and maybe we can share. Okay. So and yes, as Ms. Janaki mentioned, if anyone has a question or something to mention, please let me know so we can discuss it. Okay. So my first goal, it will be to showcase a scenario that in order to automate a business process and integrate with our Zoho app, I'm gonna justify why we need Creator plus Deluge coding. Like, I'm trying to justify that with the Zoho apps that we have, when we implement these kind of tools, we can get a lot better results in some types of automations, right? So I want to prove that to you, that sometimes we need Creator plus Deluge to make this happen. Okay, so after this, I would like to validate that creating these kind of products or tools, they're definitely a competitive advantage for our clients. What do I mean with this? We all know that Zoho is a technology asset provider. They give us all the tools, all the assets that we need to build, but it's not built. They are expecting, or they rely on developers to finish this, to customize to the customer. So this makes our tools be unique on the market and makes us very much competitive. And this can make a real advantage to our clients. And once we realize this, we know we have a lot in our hands, right? And also that our clients and Zoho are relying on us coders. The business model that Zoho has, it relies on us, right? We know they have the developer program, the partner programs, right? So once we know that this is a key value, we can embrace it, right? And also, I want to show you a little tool so we can use it when we sell, right? I just want to try to show how we can show to our clients the benefit of our tools of cost reduction and time reduction. Okay, so let's move forward. And if there's no question at this point, we can go forward to the business case scenario. Is that okay? So we'll continue. Okay, so this is a Mexican-American company. This is a more than 30-year company who are involved in manufacturing. They produce all of these products. We're talking about water pumps, like firefighter equipment, but they build it, right? They don't piece it together. They actually build all of this stuff, right? So the issue that they have is that they have more than 800 items that they have to purchase, that they have to inventory, and they're raw materials that they actually get converted into items or products eventually. So this is a very job-intensive process. This takes 2 people, 1 day of a week completely to always be updating all of this. Because the purchases that they make, they always change. Like, it's not like a product that you will expect that the price will always be the same. Talking about metals, about materials for construction, for manufacturing, they are always changing because of the dollar, because of the petroleum, and because X, Y, Z. So it's very hard to keep track of this, right? And it takes time. Right. So what we did is a way to automate the purchase orders that they receive, so that they can actually import them into Zoho Inventory. Right. So the solution will be an app that will work side by side to inventory, so that we can extract all of the data that we get from the purchase orders that they need to supply their stock, and then process this data so it will be unified and it can be imported into inventory. So let's talk a little bit more about the workflow, right? And there are some things that we need to consider. Okay, so what is the issue? They have a lot of POs and they need to import them quickly, right? But there is an issue. What happens, as you can see, okay, so the thing that we need to consider is that in order to do a mass import, we need a predefined, unified, and consistent file structure to extract the data. What do I mean? For example, I will assume that many of us has already worked with Zoho Inventory. And whenever we try to import data, actually, I can go to a sample here. So when we try to import the data, we know that it's gonna require us certain fields, right? And if the format is not correct, if the date is not correct, if the fields are not formatted correctly, if some fields are missing, we are not gonna be able to do this. And we know that all of our providers, they might have different types of file, right? So this is the first issue that we need to overcome. And this is why we need Deluge and Creator, right? Because let's say, imagine that we have 3 providers. As we can see the red box, vendor's PO code, we can have a provider that will send us their purchase order in Excel file. Then we can have someone that will send it in a PDF. And then we might have someone that will send it in a doc file. So how can you unify and massify the import if you have different files, right? So let's go to the second point. Like, what if the vendor uses different POs, right? Like, let's say one vendor can call its items services. Another vendor can call its products or line items. And when you're gonna try to import this into inventory, it's gonna bounce because it's not going to be mapped correctly. So this is the first issue we need to resolve, to do something like this, right? To unify and have a consistent file so we can map correctly. Okay. So what do we do if we don't have a unified format of purchase orders? We have two options. Okay. The first option, it will be to have a unified file that I'm going to show you how in Mexico this works. But if we don't, we will have to make a function to extract from each of these purchase order files the data. Okay, so we know that in Zoho Creator we have these functions to extract data from files. We can actually extract data from images, from PDFs, from doc files, from XLS files, right? So in order to have a predefined and structured format, we will have to make a code to extract the data from each of these files. So this is what we did, and I'm going to show you how we can make this quickly, right? Okay, so also things that we need to be careful on this is we need to avoid duplicating records, right? Because you can make a real mess. You just make a mass import and send all the data to inventory. These could actually trigger errors. So we should be careful about that, right? Let's take care about the mandatory fields and also the statement execution limit. It's also important to take care about it. All right, so let's go to the graphic. So this is the workflow. The usual workflow will be that a client will request a purchase order to a vendor. A vendor will provide a PO quote, right? Or a PO, and it could be in different formats, right? In Mexico, we have something, a taxing agency that actually unifies all of the POs, like every sale, every purchase, every payment, every payroll that is paid in Mexico has to be validated by the government, right? So right now, I'm not going to do a code per type of PO because I already have a unified format that the government provides. I will show you a file in a second. Okay, so once we have a unified file format to import, then we have these functions where we are going to upload all of the invoices in one shot, right? Then we're going to extract the data from those invoices that we uploaded massively into the system, right? We're going to create vendors, we're going to create the items, and then we're going to have a unified PO ready to import into inventory. So this is why we need Creator. This is why we need Deluge. So we can prepare and format the data so it can be uploaded to the predefined format and it can be mapped correctly. All right. And then we will have the vendor sync, item sync, and then we can talk about the syncing the POs. All right. Okay, so a little bit of the function index. We're gonna get the inventory vendor items. We're gonna update the items into inventory, and then we're gonna maybe make an upload of or an export of the file so we can see it's ready to import. Okay. Something about the documentation. We can use the Creator API documentation. We can use the inventory API documentation. This will help us to create the items, to create the vendors. The Zoho integration task, which is the task that we are going to review today, and also the inventory task. Okay.
Sure, Jorge. So to give you all a heads up regarding this, in Zoho Inventory, we only have an option to import the file in Excel format. If it is something that is not supported in any one of the Excel formats, like Jorge mentioned, we need to go for a custom application and extract the data from there and do the conversion and directly fetch the data using APIs.
Correct, yes. We have these formats, and absolutely, if you have another format, you cannot do this. And the system will not copy this, and you will get errors. So thank you very much for that contribution. Thank you very much. So yes, I will go to the demo at this point, right? So I think that I can zoom a little bit. I hope that everybody can have a glance of it. So right now I am at my purchase order panel. Okay, so I got my purchase order, my purchase receipt, my bills, my total bill, my subtotal, right? And right now I don't have any purchase orders uploaded into the system, and I don't have any vendors. Okay, we can prove this. And also I don't have any item on the system. Okay, so let's talk about again about the unified file, right? So in Mexico, as mentioned, every invoice that we create, the government checks it, validates it. Okay, so let me open this, one of these, and you can see this is an XML file, which is not readable to inventory, right? But as you can see, we have, for example, in this case, all of the invoices from 1 week, right? I'm going to open a new file. We're going to use both. And we have one for another month, which is like 108 invoices, just expenses, not income, not payroll, right? Just expenses. So the good part, I will go back to my presentation. Sorry, I'll be hopping a little bit, is this part. So the issue that we have for this to happen, and this is something that people have to deal with it day by day, is that this part, the red part. We don't have a unified format. Fortunately, in Mexico and a lot of countries, so I open this to everybody because I know this by law, this is happening all over the place. Like all Latin America is happening, and I wouldn't know other continents, but I know it is happening, right? And I think it's gonna happen all over the world, right? This is my guess. Right, so in the issue of getting the unified format, we already have it, right? So we're moving from the green spot to the golden one, okay? Because we already got this format. So whenever we go to our government portal, like taxing portal, we can actually download all of the invoices, and this is what I started working on, all right? If you don't have a unified file in your country, you will have to do a code per format. Let's say if you have one vendor who uses PDF in certain format, you will have to make a code to extract the data from that PDF. And if you have another vendor that has another format, you have to do the same, okay? So that will be my recommendation. But if you have a unified way to get it, that's much better, right? Because I just go to the government, I export my files, but now I can integrate it to my Zoho account, right? So this is what the government gives me whenever I export these files. It is a zip file with XMLs, with all of the invoices and all of the data that I need. But how can I make it go into my system? So let's go back. And okay, so this will be the first automation. First, I'm gonna upload my zip file. Okay, I'm just gonna delete this so we can prove that we don't have anything else here. Sorry, my system is in Spanish, so if some stuff is not recognizable, please ask me. But okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is upload one of these files, okay? So there we go. So I'm gonna upload. There's no record on my report. And I'm gonna get this file for now, okay? And I'm gonna open it and I'm gonna submit. As you can see, no purchase order, no vendors, no items yet. But if I go back to my report, I can see that I have one extracted file, one zip file with 30 documents that are already extracted here. I have a function that on submit, it will extract all the files inside the zip file. So now let's check. If I open one of these, sorry, we can prove that we have the XML file. And if I actually look for it, sorry. It's here. Okay. So this will be the first automation out of it, right? Like I very fast got the data into my system. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to extract the actual data of the POs and create the items, create the vendors, and create the POs that we're going to export and import into the system, right? So let's go ahead and do the process. And I actually set this button map, so it's very graphic what we're going to do. Okay, so I'm going to do one previous step before we extract all of the data. But eventually, the function that we have is first we extract the files from the zip file, and then we extract all of the data from the XML file, right? And we can do this, as mentioned, on images, PDFs, Excels, and many type of data that we need, right? So once we map the data, okay. Let me just give a little refresh here. We can see we got the XML here, right? Okay, so let's go back. So now what I'm going to do is run a second function that is going to extract the XML data. And I will go back to this sample that we don't have anything here right now. Once we extract the data, everything is going to be done at once. Okay. Just a little alert there, but there we go. So now we can see that all of our POs have been done. All of our vendors have been created and assigned into the PO. And all of the items on those POs have been created. So this is a very quick way that we can extract the data and check the data, and well, we can do it again, right? Let's do it again. So we go back. So we're gonna do it from here. So you can see what we got, one with 30 files right now. So now we're gonna do July. This one is a bigger file. It's 108, so a little bit. All right. Okay, so 108 plus 30, we got all of the files here. Again, my function will only extract the data from not extracted files. So as you can see right now, the expense, this is in Spanish, the expense has been linked into the file. All right, so I'm gonna do it again. And let's refresh here. There we go. All right, so this process is the one that I wanted to prove that we cannot make it maybe on inventory. That there could be some workarounds, but the no duplicity issue, being able to actually check the purchase orders, I think it makes it very manageable to work here in Creator. So now let's try to sync our vendors and our items into inventory. Okay, so let's go back into inventory. We can see we don't have any items right now. Also vendors. Okay, so why don't we go to our functions, and this is where we can go ahead and check a little bit of the code. I'm gonna zoom a little bit more. Let me talk you through it on how this works, right? Right now I have a range of just creating 3 records. I'm gonna do a sample one for you. So right now what I'm doing is whichever of my providers who doesn't have a Zoho Inventory ID will be created into inventory. This is how we can make sure that we don't make any duplicated record, right? For our vendors, for our items, for our purchase order, if we want to have them on sync, whenever we create a record in inventory, we need to bring back the inventory ID so that we can actually update, delete, or do whatever we need to that item. All right, so all right. So we got a response here. Okay, so one already existed and the other ones got created. So let's go back here. Oh, sorry, it already exists. I think I didn't delete them. There we go. So now we got the response that the vendor got created. So if we go back to our panel, okay, we can see that we got now an inventory ID. These will help us to have a connection with the system, right? So let's remove the range. Let's just make them all, and then we will go to the code. Okay, in this case, I want to mention that we have to be very careful because, for example, if I was to make more than 100 records per minute, and please, maybe I have wrong the number of API calls. If Zoho team can help me with that, but I think it is 100 API calls per minute. You will be blocked for 30 minutes, right? So we cannot do all of the items right now. Yes.
Yeah, this is something that is common for all Zoho Finance applications. If you try to hit more than 100 API calls within a minute, your account will be blocked. You won't be able to access any of the modules inside Zoho Inventory or Zoho Books for 30 to 45 minutes. This block will be automatically removed from the backend, after the time gap. So to be on safer side, we always suggest users to keep the API count well within 100 calls in a minute.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the clarification. So yes, you have to be very careful with that because imagine that you have this and you have a very high volume of POs to process, and you can block the company's API calls for a time, right? So if the code is constantly doing this, you can block the company like a half a day, right? Or inadvertently, because maybe I'm going to press the code one time, but maybe another teammate is going to do it again, right? So we have to be careful about this, right? These are things we need to consider. So it's a workable function. So, okay.
Yes, Jorge. So to handle this case, we do have a workaround. Like we have a third-party sleep call. You can put it by end of each loop, so that after creation of each record, there will be a time gap between hitting the subsequent API. So if you have this time space, you can try to run a list of records inside a loop and create multiple records at a time. So I'll share the sleep call with you. So for all of us to have a check on.
Oh, this is great. This is great because yeah, this is actually the part that took me more time because I had to remake the code, right? Because I learned on the documentation that you can make it more efficient. Like the fetches, if you limit the fetches, if you set parameters to the fetches, you will make less statement calls, right? So that will be great because that got me a little bit, right? So thank you very much. Okay, excellent. So now we can see that the vendors have been created. And Get Greedy is not my name of my app. So we can see that we have an ID here. So now I can actually communicate from inventory to creator. So maybe I want to change the payment method. Maybe I want to change the name, right? And this could be on sync, right? So let's go back to the code so we can check what exactly we did, right? Let me bring back the range so this doesn't happen. Okay, so first of all, we need, I have set this on a custom function, right? We can set this to trigger on any event, on a schedule, on submit, but I set this on a custom function precisely to do not risk the statement limit, right? I want to trigger this by a button and a limit amount of records per time. So I avoid this error, right? So I will really appreciate that code, well, to learn about it. So, okay. The first thing we need to do to add the vendor is fetch the record. So what we're doing right here is we're fetching the values of the providers or the vendors that we have here, right? We're fetching all of the records that do not have an inventory ID, and we are making a map here, right? So for each record or each row, I like to reference like how to visualize data for new coders, right? Like I like to visualize that everything is like a spreadsheet, right? Everything is on a row and in a column, right? So what we're doing here on this fetch, we're fetching rows and columns from one module, one report, from one record, right? So when we do a for each, we're basically on each of those records that we're doing, we're going for each row, right? We're reading each of the rows of the record and we're mapping them to somewhere else, right? So I like to call this to visualize all of the data as a spreadsheet. This helped me a lot to understand how things work and they get connected one record to another, right? So the first things that we need to take care is our mandatory fields, right? So let's go back to just real quick to the documentation. Sorry, I will. All right. So in order to create a contact, this is where we have to pay attention to the documentation, is what type of contact are you creating, right? Because if we create if we don't take care about the documentation, we can miss this and we have to specify that this is not a customer, that this is a vendor, right? So I would recommend everybody to go over the documentation to see what required fields do you have. For example, you cannot create a record if you don't have a contact name. So this should be a mandatory field on your code, right? But also, this is mandatory for inventory. We need to know what are the mandatory fields for us, for our company, like the purchase account, the expense account, right? And all of the complementary data, like the address that we need, if we have a shipping process, these are also data that we need to capture, and it will be great to automate, right? So let's go back to our code. So the first thing we need to focus on, my vision, is the mandatory fields, right? And we know that it's going to ask us for an organization ID. It's going to ask us for a what's the contact type, and we have not set, now set, hard-coded, that is a vendor. Okay, right? The other thing to consider, and is very, I would say it's different how it's mapped, is the custom fields, right? Let me go back to inventory. This field, the one that we use to integrate with Creator, it's a custom field. It doesn't exist by fix it in inventory. We have to create it, but these fields get mapped differently, right? So if we go back to our code, we need to make a map per item, per custom field. Okay, I'm gonna go back here. So now, as you can see, I have mapped one field here, custom field map 1, custom field 2. Okay, so every custom field has to be mapped with its value and its label in Zoho Inventory, right? And once we map each of these fields, as you can see, we have a map here, we have a map here. These both maps will have to go into a list, right? And this list will go as a normal map of any other field, right? As you can see, for example, contact type is a direct map, right? It's just one field mapped to another. But this one is a map inside a list that will go into one field. Okay. So then, so as you can see, we are getting all of the data prepared first, right? First, we went for the vendor data that we've already created in Creator. And then we are extracting all of the data from that row, from that record, from those columns and rows. And we are preparing the data to be mapped correctly into its proper field. Okay. So then we get to extract the vendor data. And as you can see, we're making reference to the for each. So let's say row 1 of vendor data, row X or 1, 2, 3, we're getting the name of the company, which is, if we remember, a required field. So we go back. So vendor data, each row, and then we start mapping each of them. Okay. And then we're gonna get into our connection. This is also a very interesting part. Zoho has made it very easy for us to integrate our apps and be very secure, right? So let's hop into So how do I get a connection, and how do I make that I can talk from one app to another? So we need to go to the creator's admin panel. We can create a new connection so that our creator and inventory talk together. But I'm not gonna do a new one. I'm just gonna go to the one that we already have, right? So let's edit this one. So as you can see, our connection has already activated certain access that they can do. For example, we can create purchase orders. We can create, update, and read items. We can create, read, and update contacts, and also bills, right? But let's say that I want to do something else, right? Like maybe I want to do an expense, and maybe not a purchase order, because maybe on this mass import, I will have expenses, I will have purchase orders, and maybe I will have payroll stuff. So I will need to edit this connection every time that I need to have a new access into the system, right? So if we go to inventory, as you can see, for example, if I wanted to delete the contacts, I can add it. If I want to create a composite item, if I want to create an invoice, maybe, right? I'm just going to add them. It doesn't hurt right now. So this is how you will get permission every time to update your application. So this is very interesting because you can limit this so that only you can use it with your credentials, or you can make them public to everyone, right? So you can work on this to keep control of your data and also make it very secure, right? So once we authorize a new we can set up which stage or environment this can be worked. Okay, so I'm going to authorize it. And as you can see, Zoho is prompting us to accept or decline the access to your system. So we're going to accept this. And we will get the... Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so apart from selecting all the accesses, manually, we can go for full access all. So there is a specific scope in this create connection thing, wherein you can only select a single scope and it will give you entire access to all the modules, starting from items to sales. I will just write the scope here. It will be useful for you. Just a moment.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Yes. Absolutely.
So
this is
Zoho Inventory dot full access dot all.
Okay, let's go ahead. There we go. So yes, if you want to get full access into the system, we can definitely use this function, right? So let's see how much functions is going to open to us. There we go. So it opened all of the system. Correct. So this is how you can manage. You can create keys for X or Y users. You can make it just for you, just for admin. So this is a way that you can control, for example, that I can just create items, but I cannot delete them. Or I can create them, but not update them, right? So this is key so that data is secure and also the workflow is done properly as our client needs it. So and this is much easier than creating auth tokens, refreshing the auth tokens. That's another topic, right? So yeah, perfect. Okay, so we go back to our code. And as you can see, I have also declared my connection as a variable, but I have set the value that we just created, right? So I'm just gonna type it in. We already have it here, but let's do it again. Like, this is the integration task that will send our vendors from Zoho Creator into inventory. So to do this is very easy. I'm just going to call it off for now. And let's say the only thing that you have to do is type in Zoho dot inventory, and this will work for many of Zoho apps. Some of them are limited, but most of Zoho apps have an integration task. And all of the integration tasks, they are a bit limited compared to the API. So whenever this integration task is not enough, I will recommend to use the invoke URL task to make an external API call, right? But that's not topic for today. But as you can see, we can connect directly to Click, to bookings, invoice, writer, desk. Almost all of the services, we have them here. So this is a super tool that we need to have on our day-to-day basis as a Zoho developer. And also, we know that there's some limitations of the amount of API calls we can make. So we also have to be sharp about it in saying, okay, how much integration tasks I'm going to use, how much API external calls I'm going to use, so we can make use of all of the assets that Creator gives to us, right? So if we go to Zoho Inventory, then we press dot, and here you can see all the things that we can do, right? So as you can see, we can do some stuff, but let me go back to the documentation. It's definitely not all of the stuff that we can do, okay? For example, uploading a file into Creator, we will have to do an API, an external API call with invoke URL. So yeah, it's good to know when we can use one and the other. So let's go back. So in this case, we want to create a record, right? We're going to map the values that we have formatted, and we're going to map the values into inventory. And as you can see, Zoho helps us a lot on this. It's going to give us a prompt of what we need, right? So as you can see, the first thing we need is the module. Like, okay, I'm going to send this data where, right? So there we're going to type in contacts, right? Because we're going to use the contacts API. Here we have the auth scope, and here we have the module name, right? So this is why it's good to always have the documentation ready. Then it's asking us for the organization ID, okay? Because let's remember that Zoho lets us have more than one organization, so we need to specify where it should go, right? So this is also important to consider into your mandatory fields. And then it's requesting us the map of all the parameters or all of the values that we are going to send into the system, right? And then last but not least, the connection link, right? So let's just type it in. Contacts. I already have my organization ID. As you remember, we mapped the value first here. So it's ready to go. All right. And then it requests us the map that we're going to send. What do we mean? All of the data that we have extracted from the PO, and we have neatly formatted here and mapped it into this map. Sorry for the redundancy there. So on this map, you can see we have the contact name, we have the company name, the contact type, and the custom fields, which are the funny ones to map in this case, right? So vendor map will go on the third index of our API, of our integration call, right? So let's see what happens right now if I don't add the connection. Okay, I'm sending this as a number. Okay, this is also a good error to notice. We have two options here. Right now it's telling me that the second value, the organization ID, should be a string, right? But I added this as a number, as an integer, right? So we have two options. We can just state it as a string up here, or we could use a to string, right? I actually did it both. That's okay. Oh, let's just info task this. In here. I know what's happening. We have created all of our vendors right now, right? So yes, right now it's not creating anyone because all of our vendors have been created. So let's just. Okay, so now that I have removed the API key, it's telling me that, well, it tried to make it, but it already exists, right? So you can see that this is working. We can do it. I'm going to do it again so we can show this working. Okay, so I removed all the IDs, so our filter will work, our fetch. Okay. Right? So as you can see, we have added all of our vendors at one shot, right? Well, maybe not at one because we're trying to keep the execution limit, but just on one click, right? So I would like to make a touch point here. Do we have any question, doubts about the code? Okay, so right now we don't have any items. Let's go to all items. This other stuff. All right, so let's go to our next code. So just to recapitulate what we did is first, we got the vendor data. Then we interacted with each of the records. We formatted the data per record so we can map the correct values to create the vendor. And then we use the integration task so that the record could be created in inventory. And last but not least, we're getting the response when we create the vendor, right? So if the vendor already exists, we're gonna get one message, this one. And if it doesn't exist, we're gonna get a different message, right? And if the contact ID that I'm mapping here okay. So we get the response, we create the record, we get a response, we check the code, and whenever it gets done correctly, we're trying to get the ID of the vendor, right? Because this is what we need to have on sync our Creator app with inventory, right? So let's prove that we have this. So we're getting from the response that we get from the system, we're getting the contact ID here. Right? So we got a contact ID here. Let's get the ID. And we have more actually, right? Because we did several. So let's use one of these IDs to check if this is true. All right, so we got one here. This is actually my born city. Interesting. All right, let's go to another one just to validate. So as you can see, this is another one. The records did got created. So once we get the response and we get the ID, we need to map it back directly into the vendor. So this is why we're using the X as a variable, the one that we assigned here, right? We got the vendor data. We were interacting on each row of the fetched rows that we got from the module. And we extracted all of the data, right? We got the data from it. But now we're bringing back data. So you can see the equal of this is going to be on the right. But when we're going to map back the value, is going to be on the left, and the new value that we just got, the contact ID, will go on the right. And this will produce that right now the inventory ID is null. Now it isn't. Right, so let's do another 6. Okay, so we're bringing back the ID. Let's prove it again. All right, so we got another one. Okay. So if we go back to our items, you can see that we don't have an ID for inventory right now. And also that the items do not exist. So let's go to the second code. So this is exactly the same, mostly the same, right? So I think it's going to be pretty easy to go over it. So again, what are the first thing that we should do? First, we need to map. So in the first one, we went for the vendors, right? So now we want to check what items were purchased in the purchase order, okay? So the first thing that we need to do is map our purchase order. So we have it here, right? So any purchase order that is null and does not have a Zoho Inventory ID. Actually, this is a string, so it should be like this. So if any record of the purchase order on its row does not have an inventory ID, we're going to bring it and we're going to process 3 by 3, right? So now that we have a list of purchase orders or rows, we're going to interact with them, right? So for each row or record that we have on our purchase orders, we're going to, again, extract the data, right? So as we know, let me just create one purchase. When we have a purchase order or an invoice, we need to keep in mind that we have a parent form, which is the actual invoice or the bill. And then we have a child form, right? Which is, or a sub form in that case. So we need to first fetch the invoice. Then we need to fetch the line items that were related to that invoice. Okay, so let's go to our code. So let's go back. So we fetched all the purchase orders. We're interacting with each row of that purchase order. So now we are inside the purchase order of the row. But now the data that I'm really interested right now is not the bill or the purchase order, are the subform inside the PO. So now I'm getting the PO items that are inside of that row. But it's not inside, it's a related record to that one, right? So this is why I'm using the ID of the purchase order of that row so that I can identify all of its items. So this will produce also a list. So let's go back. First, we bring the invoice or the purchase order. We go inside of it, and then we're gonna link into the line items, right? So this is why we need to make another for each, right? So we're going to all of the purchase orders and then all of the items. So this is why we have a for each record inside the line item. So what we're doing eventually is going this field, this row, this row, this row every time, right? So the first thing we did, the first fetch, was to get each of these rows. The for each of the POs was this line, then this line, this one, right? But once we got inside the PO, we're looking for these rows. So let's go back. So each record inside the PO or the line items. So then we have to do a new fetch. And now we have to find our products, right? So now that we're already on the subform level, right? So as you can see, first we use Y as a variable, and now we're using X. So this is another fetch that we did, right? And we are trying to get the ID of the item, right? Because as mentioned, like the items in our system, they are already created, they already exist. When we extracted the data from the zip files and the XML files, sorry, the items got created. So they already exist. So this is why we're going into, sorry that I'm hopping, but I try to make it very graphic. What we're doing is we're looking for the product that is here on the row. This one. So we need to fetch the ID because this record belongs to items, not to purchase order. This database is here in items, right? So we need to get the ID in order to interact with the record. So yes. So this is a little bit different, right? So we get all the invoices, then we get the line items, and then we start doing the same map that we did. We get to our mandatory fields. We go to our organization ID. We have to set what type of item we're creating. This is also very important. I will go back to our documentation. We go to items. We can see this is key to know that the item type, you have to take care of this, right? Because if you set it as sales, You will not be able to make inventory out of it. If you make it just, if you don't make it inventory, for example, you cannot make it as a group of items. So I encourage everybody to take a look at the documentation. It's very clear. And also you can know what are, as mentioned, the mandatory data that is needed. All right, so let's go back to our code. So as mentioned, I am formatting the data. I'm predefining my map. For example, I said that this is an inventory item. I have said what is my purchase account, what is my inventory account, the product type, right? And also I have some custom fields that I have created so that I can sync my app with inventory. This is going to be necessary for all of us to do if we want to have them on sync. And then we do the item map. So this is just data preparing, and then we're going to do the actual map that is going to go into inventory. Right? So as you can see, we have all of the required fields here. Again, the custom fields, these we have to take a little bit care about this. As mentioned, we have to map the field, and then we have to add those maps into a list. Things to take care of. Okay, so let's give it a try. And let's just type in again, how do we create the integration tabs? So again, we go Zoho.inventory.create records. And again, we will have the module that is going to help us understand what we need to send. The module, the organization ID, the parameters that we need to send, that we need to check the API documentation to see which one are mandatory, and also that I don't have issues further on, because as we know, sometimes when you make records to the items, you cannot delete them. So it's a big mess if we do not register the items or the vendors correctly. Okay, so I'm just gonna run the function again. And we're gonna take care about our statement execution limit. It's okay. Let's go check the response. Okay, so let's go back to our code. And what do we did, right? So we created the record. We got a response. We're gonna go to a response in just a second. We are getting the response and getting to know if it was wrong or if it went through, right? So again, from the response that we get from the system on the integration task or the API call, we are getting the data from it. We're getting into the node items, and then we're getting the record item ID. And again, this value has to be mapped back into Creator so that we can keep track of these items, right? So let's see if we actually got an item ID from this call. Right, as you can see, we got one here. We got another one here. So let's prove if the items were created. As you can see, we got one here. Okay, we got another one there, right? Okay, so At this part, we can see that we can communicate our app from Creator and send our data back to it. We can do a lot of stuff, right? We can do invoices, we can do bills, we can do anything that is needed to update directly to inventory. We can actually work it here. As you can see, you have a lot of freedom to work the fields. There's a limit, but virtually there's no limit to the fields that you can use to format, to edit, to make calculations, right? So this is why Creator is a perfect tool to do this, to bring automation to the companies. So this was a little proof of how we can sync this process into inventory, right? So for example, now that I have purchase orders from a lot of vendors, right? A lot of vendors that they use, everyone uses a different format. Now I have them in one, right? I have managed to bridge the barrier of an XLS file, XML file, I'm sorry. And now I can communicate with inventory. And for example, just to make it simple, we could also make this with an API like the one we did to send the items, the one we did to send the vendors. We can do it the same, exactly the same. It will be exactly the same map. It will be exactly the same process, but we're just going to interact with purchase orders or bills, right? If you want to send it as a bill, you can send it as a bill, or you can send it as a purchase order and then just mark it as a bill, for example, right? So so now we can export the data, just to make it a little bit more graphic then. Okay, so now I got a unified file. I could actually import into inventory, right? So this was my goal, to show like how this gets done. Sorry. I'm just muting here. Okay. Okay, so we got our unified file with all of our values that we need to map back into inventory and communicate, right? So now we could use any of these files, or just, as mentioned, I don't think we should go to all of these APIs because it's the same principle of how we do it. But now I could just go to my purchases, purchase orders, and I can just import my file. And now I know that the data will be correct, that the dates will be correct, that I have all the required fields, that it will go with my expense account, with my inventory account. So this will actually insert correctly into our system. And we, in this case, if we make the API, we can just avoid this process, right? But if we have a predefined map of what of our fields go, where do they go? We can just save this, so the map that we did, because now it's predefined. Like every time that I export a file from here, well, the names were always going to be the same, right? So actually, I recommend to change the name of the columns to the exact name that inventory has. Let's say if item price is called item price here, and we have it as a different name, like importe unitario, which is in Spanish right now, I would recommend to change it to how inventory knows it, because this will automatically match the field with the value that we are importing. Okay, so I will go back to my presentation and maybe take a quick break on the code to make maybe a little bit of questions or comments on this. But this is how I want to demonstrate that we can, a very time-consuming process prone to error. It could be completely automated with a simple click of a button, right? We took out some time checking the code, but eventually we could see that this was done pretty fast, right? We just need to, again, like upload our zip file. We extract the data, and we can see that all of the data of our invoice got created. Okay, we see how it got paid, what's the company, the name of the provider, its tax and ID. This is also something that is very important, that I actually formatted this not just for inventory, but for the client. Because, for example, in Mexico, you have to set all of these parameters to actually make a valid invoice, right? For example, like how it got paid, what's the use of these items, right? So all of these specifications have been done in one shot. Right? We have the totals got calculated. We got the business data. We got some URLs to validate that the invoice is actually true, that it's working. We got the IDs of the invoice. So this helps really a lot to the company, because now they can conciliate. They have three benefits here, because they are in sync with the government, because to make the accounting is sometimes it's very hard, because sometimes the government has one data and in your system you have another data. So this is impacting, which is the next topic that we're gonna check. This is impacting more than one area. This is impacting inventory stocks. This is impacting accounting, administration, production in one shot. So let's go to see some equation that I did to see how much benefit we can get out of it. And maybe least we can do just a quick, like how quick it is, right? Like without explaining, how can I do it very quick? But we can do that least, unless anyone want to go through any of these processes, right? Some of you will have to start from the purchase order creation. Some of you will have to start from the vendor quote that they will send to us. But in our case, or if your country has a unified validation of invoices, I would recommend to get it from there. So as you can see, we got the PDF, the zip file uploaded. We extracted the data. We created the vendors, created the items, and also we got a unified PO that we can use. Even though we're talking about hundreds of invoices and maybe dozens of providers, right? And also we proved how we can sync our apps with the ID. This is a key thing we need to know, so that we can have a unique value of inventory and a unique value from creator, so they can talk to each other. Okay, so a little bit about the gold validation. We have proven that the data formatting we need to do, the massive import, it will not be possible directly in Zoho Inventory. All of these instances to upload the zip file and then extract the zip file and do it in a timely manner, and then sending. Right now, I'm just sending 6, but we can do a different trigger to send X or Y files into the system. So this is why I do recommend getting into your tool asset creator to work with the tools. Like the combination of Zoho One plus Creator is phenomenal. And we're going to see a return of investment calculation, just a quick one, so we can have an idea like how impactful this could be, and also how we can calculate this to benefit us as coders, right? So yeah, and the second point that I want to talk about it is, if we build over worldwide available standard feature of Zoho, this is definitely a competitive advantage, right? Either if you are a solo coder, or you're a company who does Deluge coding, or you're a company that wants to develop a team, this is definitely a competitive advantage, because nobody has it, okay? Like Zoho has made it so well as being a private company, not like a Wall Street company who does whatever stakeholders want to do, right? I mentioned this part that they consider us developers in the process. So they don't want to fit everybody on the same box. They're giving you the assets so you can make something specific for your process. So you're pretty sure that nobody in the world has it. Maybe somebody has something alike, but no one has it as you have it. So this is definitely a competitive advantage because I'm going to prove right now how much time and the cost of opportunity of not doing this it will produce, right? So this is key to know. Whatever we do as a customization, nobody has it. So if I'm in a very competitive industry and I make things 1 hour faster, like let's say companies that make like government tramits or like permits, those are like fast companies, right? And also these companies, if they don't know their cost accurately, if you don't know how much you can stretch a promotion, a discount, this is definitely a loss in in your competitivity versus the industry. So this is something that I will always love about Zoho, that it can, even though we have a very worldwide standard tool, they're always unique. And this is a market niche for us developers. And as a developer, it's a market niche. As a company, it's a competitive advantage if you use Deluge for your processes. Okay, so let's go see and do a quick calculation of how much time we can get out of this type of tools, and also how much money could this be worth. Okay, so as my business background, I like to see things on many spectrums, right? So whenever we do an automation to a system, we always try to see that, oh, okay, I'm doing things faster. I'm reducing cost. But I'm going to prove to you that we're missing something in our business propositions that we should definitely have them. And there is a term in economics that is called cost of opportunity. All right. This is what you lose to win. Like this is whatever you don't win because you chose another thing. Let me put a very clear example. Let's talk about cars, automotive, right? Let's say I have a sedan, like a four-wheeler little car, and a pickup truck. Okay. So the sedan, which is 4 cylinders, my cost of opportunity will be the next. Let's say my mileage for gas is better than the pickup truck, but I cannot carry more than 2 tons of weight. So I have cheap gas, but I cannot carry anything. So that's my cost of opportunity. I can move around, but I cannot carry. And if I choose to buy a pickup truck, I can carry a lot, but it's gonna cost me a lot. So I better make a profitable trip every time that I do it. So this is a very clear example of cost of opportunity. So in a business case, in a Deluge case, it will be, would I have manual labor on a very cost-intensive process in a bottleneck every time and throw people to the process? Or maybe I'm gonna take a decision to reduce this in a very significant way so that I can use those resources in something else, right? So every time that we're making a repetitive, cost-expensive process solvable by Deluge, we have a cost. There is a hidden cost there. So let's make an example. Let's say that we have an employee type 1, right? This employee will work 40 hours per week, right? The cost per hour, it will be $4.33. This is a $1,500 per month, okay? Just a regular payment, all right? So this means that our cost per week, it will be $173, right? But let's say I make this so we can make calculations. I can share this so you can make, or you can make your own. But let's say that we reduce with this tool 8 hours of work out of the week. All right. So now I have a new cost for my week. So I have the 20% of my time of the week. Now it's spent. Let's say I did the process, but I now have 8 more hours to work, or maybe not, right? You can just not do nothing out of them, right? But you have 20% more time available. So the first thing we need to know is this has a reduction of cost of this amount per week, and if you exponentiate this, we're talking about $1,800 per year. That's almost, it's more than a month of cost. That's very significant. It's like you're paying like 12 months out of the 12 months of a year. That's a good number that we can present, right? And this is just for one company, one employee. If we were to make this tool actually work for payroll, income, expenses, and also payments. The function does it all, right? But I just showed the one of expenses. So if I can make this not one employee, if there are 3, let's say type 1, because they're all admins, let's say. But I reduce from this employee 8 hours, and then from payroll another 8 hours, and from invoicing 8 hours. We're talking about a big reduction of cost to the company. Okay, and let's remember, every cost reduction that we do, it's a direct effect into utilities of the company. And if it doesn't affect quality, this one affect quality, but in a positive way. Every cost reduction is money in the pocket to our clients. All right, because it's money that they already have. It's going away, but this is money that you will have to pay because it's a payroll, right? You cannot say, oh, I'm saving the money, because you have to keep the person is working there, right? So this is a cost of opportunity. Okay, this is what now you have saved out of it. So now let's say that okay, so the working hours per year, we're talking about 2,000 hours. The difference that we're getting is we liberated from that person 416 hours on the year. Okay, so if we have 416 hours available extra that I have nothing to do, let's say my Mondays, I don't have Mondays. Like I did invoices on Mondays and POs on Mondays, it's gone. Not what do I do? These processes, like compliance processes, they don't add value. The client doesn't care if you have good accounting, if your stock is on the point. No added cost for them is worth it to do it, right? So all of these process, but you have to do it because now you got a trouble with the government. So you have to do it. You have to spend the time and the resources to do it, right? So, but now that you have one very capable person and you spare them one day of the week to do a copy paste and check balances, to just reduce it to 3 clicks. Well, now you have 400 hours for that person to do something else that could be for value for you. For example, like data analysis, KPIs, stock management, security stock management, sales, whatever you think it's better. Now you have more time. So let's say that sorry, I removed I clicked on it went to the next screen. I'm sorry. Okay, we're back. So let's say that this is a little bit cold, but every business owner has a return of investment of every employee, right? Or a desired return of investment. So let's say that we have a 100% return of investment that I expect from the payment that I do. Let's say I pay $1,500 per month. I expect that person is going to produce to the company another 1,500, right? Because maybe the company will get 1,000 and utility another 500, right? So if we do this, the compound value, this is, I want to mention, this is not real money on your pocket. This is what now you have, by the decision that you have made, now you have extra time. And this time is equivalent to this cost. But now it doesn't have to go from your pocket because you're already paying it. So you would, the answer is that you went more productive. You did the same job at less time, and now you can do something else. And I bet that many people who work on these areas, they will prefer do strategic planning stuff. They just be like data entry records, and well, companies I would say prefer to use these resources into more strategic activities, right? So I will encourage everybody to use this kind of analysis. This is very short, I would say, because we cannot measure at this point the exponential results that we will get from these 400 hours, because these 400 hours were only cost, no added value, compliance, data entry. Data entry does have value, right? But that cost. So now we can do something else with this. So yeah, I wanted to share this point of view of how to get the real benefit of our tools. I would really encourage everybody to get in the correct business model, to acknowledge what we're doing for the companies, because I'm talking about one person here. If our job impacts a 100 company person, this number is going to be much bigger. And I would encourage everybody to get it and serve that quote, right? Because that's the value that you're creating, the proven value that you're creating. And if we can get more data, like for example, what I'm going to do with these 400 hours, we can actually compound more this value, and it's true. It's not invented, right? And actually your client is the one who can actually feed you with this data, so you can get a proper account, right? And we can have different scenarios, maybe not so possible, maybe 50%. Sorry again. Getting used to inserting the creator, right? So we can make a new type of calculation, maybe 5%, 50%, right? First of all, I would like to suggest or recommend, like, really getting to know what's your role as a Deluge developer. Okay, what's your business model? Like, how do you work with the companies, right? There's difference. Like, many people do projects, many people give support, or many people create apps, many people SaaS their services, and Zoho has a tool for all of these options. So that would be my first recommendation, because all of these, you learn it through the process. But knowing, like, how can you perform since the beginning, I would say that will save you a lot of steps. So really think about your role. Am I a partner? Am I a developer? Am I a freelance developer? But we have to take a look to what I call the Zoho value pyramid for developers. And I'm sure I had seen this in a Zoho conference. I couldn't get that. I was looking for the data, but this is how Zoho looks itself. Like they're in the tipping point, a little part of it as an asset provider. And they consider us. Like, this is something that we should know. Like, whenever you get into Zoho, you're getting a big partner, like thousands of people helping you. Support is massively impressive how they can help you out to learn. So if we understand that Zoho's business model is through us, we can know that there's an asset for us there. So this makes it very valuable to learn Deluge, because nobody's going to do it. Like, at least Mr. Spirabenbu, CEO, he said, like, when I'm alive and CEO, we're not going to go public. That means that we are the investors. We invest our time, our effort, our contacts. We are the Wall Street, the developers. We are the ones who take these decisions, not a stakeholder who invested billions and just want 1% more for its utility, right? And then we got the customers. So this is very important, because we are the bridge, we are the contact, we are the interface with the contacts. So I think that's the first thing to have, like, what's my role? Also, something that helped me a lot, to have a testing app as a repository in a in a funny way, I call it my Frankenstein app. This has helped me a lot because whenever even though it was more time consuming, every request that I got, I always went back to my app and created it there first. The one that I show you, that's my Frankenstein app, the one we were using. Every time that something happened, I go back to my app, create it there, understand what I'm doing, understand my limits. And also, you can do this by your side. Nobody has to know about it because the logs will get it. So just have some testing space where you can do everything in a relaxed manner. And then you can bring this code or your knowledge to your client. Also, as mentioned, I started coding since the pandemic, but I was working with Zoho long before, right? I was working with developers. I had developers in my team, and I'm like, working like as freelance coders working together, right? A very actual method to work. So that was very important to me because I started learning what I can do, right? Because I bridged from, oh, it cannot be done, it's not customized. So now it's very difficult to me to find something that we cannot do, right? It's very difficult for me to point like, okay, we cannot do this in Creator because you can API it, you can work with Zoho apps, or you can just make it in Creator. Okay, so please start using these, everything like the PDF, the record templates, creating the forms, all of these kind of also workflows like field tasks. You can also do it without code. So that will be my first part, because now you can know the limits. And once you get to the limit, you are going to start asking the correct questions. Instead of, can I do it? It will be, okay, it has to be done like this, right? So that's also something that I will try to encourage everybody. Working with a methodology. I actually have a consulting methodology. This is something that's very important. For me, it was very new, like the version management. If you make one change here, it can break all of your code, right? As a new coder. So having a methodology, and this is very hard because clients will always tell you like, I want this done right now, and then we can go and plan. They don't want to plan. They just want the result now. But the best thing to do is planning first. So if you can encourage your client to plan and structure what they want to do, it's going to be more efficient and cost effective for them and for you, right? Less errors, less bugs, less changes, because that's the back and forth we have there. It's incredible. So having a good methodology. Okay, so like, let's say if the client wants a button because it's UI and wants a pretty button, you have to say like, hey, you know what? That's on the 3rd stage or 5th stage. First, we're going to talk about the flow, about the fields, about the integrations, right? So if you have this kind of methodology, everything will flow a little bit easier. And also, my last one, it will be to find what's your trigger, okay? For me, as mentioned, I started coding since the pandemic. I got into in my life, I went to have a trip, like a digital nomad. My idea was to travel all America at first, and also I wanted to go to India. That was like my real goal. And I started traveling Mexico, and I went from Baja California, Mexico, and I was already in Mexico City, Querétaro, which is like half of Mexico. And then the pandemic triggered. Sorry, I have a. So this actually made me very unhappy. Okay, because my plans went away. So my trigger was this desperation, like, what do I do? I'm trapped in one city. I got no family. I got nowhere to go. And in my company, I actually had 2 triggers. Like, that one was the one that triggered, but there's 2. Okay. So I was trapped in a unknown city that I was going to be there like 3 months. And then I spent like 2 years there. So that one was very like an external trigger for me, right? And the other one was that I was always feeling short, right? Like I wanted to do things, but it was very hard for me to train people, to get people like good coders that get paid, right? Like you cannot bring a coder so easily. So you have like this, like the rooster and the egg dilemma. Like what do you get first? The clients, but you don't know how to code. It's a lot of expense, right? So I actually, by necessity, started to learn to code, right? So I think that will be my overall. I'm very open to any questions, talk about it. But these will be my suggestions, and I hope that this could show how we can integrate Zoho tools